This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The death toll from the Afghanistan bomb attacks climbs to more than 100 as the U.S. vows revenge. The UN warns of the worsening humanitarian crisis in Ethiopia's Tigray region. And kidnappers release more children in Nigeria. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, Nigeria's state oil firm posts a profit of $698 million, a first in its 44-year history. And in sports, rivalry renewed as top teams are paired in the UEFA Champions League draw. We start today's program in the Afghan capital, Kabul, where the death toll from two explosions at the airport has now risen to at least 103, with about 150 wounded. Islamic State militants claimed responsibility for Thursday's attacks. At least 28 of the Afghans killed were Taliban members. The Pentagon says 13 American military personnel were also among the dead. Tens of thousands of Afghans had been gathering at the airport trying to leave the country. Well, ISIS Khorasan, the group taking responsibility and being blamed for the bombings at Kabul airport, are in fact behind a surge in attacks spanning 3 countries. CGTN's Timothy Ulrich tells us more.
A maternity ward in Kabul, riddled with bullets. Militants left death and carnage in a place where life takes its first breath. Doctors Without Borders called the attack pure hell.
The attacker came up to me and pointed his gun at my head, but he didn't shoot. Instead, he killed 2 other women and then left the room.
The gunman killed 24 people in this attack last year, including mothers, infants, and pregnant women. The Taliban and the U.S. both blame ISIS-K for the attack, though the group has never claimed responsibility. The Islamic State of Khorasan has been blamed for the bloodshed of similar attacks since 2014 when they first emerged. ISIS-K pledged allegiance to the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, aiming to establish a Sunni caliphate. And they have claimed responsibility or have been blamed for attacks in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Tajikistan. The weapons in their arsenal include suicide bombings, guns, and fear, and they're not afraid to strike soft targets. Like this wedding in Kabul in 2019 that left over 60 attendants dead and the survivors hopeless.
I've lost hope. I lost my brother-in-law. I lost my friends. I lost my relatives. I will never see happiness in my life again.
They're also blamed for an attack in May this year on a girls' school in Kabul that killed at least 50. Their strategy was apparent before the Taliban came into power, to make Afghans distrustful of the government. A suicide bombing at a voting registration center in Kabul in 2018 that killed nearly 60 people did just that.
Look at this. This is a voting card which is drowned in blood. Who will come to vote when a government asks to?
ISIS-K are indiscriminate in their attacks, targeting Taliban, Afghan government, or American forces. It's made for strange bedfellows, with the Taliban and the U.S. sometimes coming together to fight the militant group. The threat of ISIS-K also prompted Washington in 2017 for the first time to drop the most powerful conventional weapon in its arsenal, the mother of all bombs. Nearly 10,000 kilograms, the ordnance flattened the area surrounding a cave complex in eastern Afghanistan being used by ISIS-K. Officials estimate up to 100 fighters were killed in the blast. U.S. intelligence officials say ISIS-K has been using the instability of the Taliban takeover to strengthen their position and attract more disaffected Taliban fighters. And the UN warned in June about an influx of foreign fighters entering into Afghanistan to fight alongside extremist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS-K. The attacks are ramping up this year, on track to equal or surpass those in the peak years of 2017 and 2018. It means a big challenge ahead for the Taliban as they seek to legitimate their rule over Afghanistan. Timothy Ulrich, CGTN.
Well, let's go live now to Kabul for the latest on Thursday's attacks at the airport. We're joined by CGTN's Zamar Yalai Abbasin. Zamar Yalai, thank you so much for joining us. More than 100 people have now been confirmed dead from Thursday's attack. What is the latest on what happened at Kabul airport?
Hello and good afternoon. Yes, the casualties are crossing 100 people and 150 more still injured because the explosion was very heavy. Whether there were continuous warnings and alarms by the US and the Taliban to avoid getting closer to Kabul airport, but the people didn't accept, or either the messaging was not correct, but that catastrophe and chaos happened finally. And currently, Kabul airport roads are all closed. No one is allowed to get to airport because of the Thursday catastrophe happened. And there are also communication between Taliban and US and other foreign missions to finally get access to Kabul airport to those who are eligible, got their visas, the SIVs, P1, P2, or other initiative already have applied to different sectors in Afghanistan. Yet it's Friday and the situation looks much calm and no going and coming to Kabul airport.
As you mentioned, roads are closed coming to and from the airport, but are there security officers on site? How is the airport being secured, considering that many people are still trying to evacuate from Kabul airport?
The security situation is now look much controlled. The Taliban have increased their measure all around the city, and all the roads and streets are blocked to Kabul airport. And there are also reports that the Taliban and US are in communication and coordinating some new measures like escorting all those who are eligible to Kabul airport. And the security alarming still continues. Also, US and UK has alarmed people to still avoid reaching to Kabul airport because there might be other similar attacks on Kabul airport. That's why the people are afraid. One side, the Taliban are not letting them closer to the airport, and the security situation in the rest of the city and all around the country looks much calm, and there has been no report about any incident till Thursday, two twin attacks.
Well, thank you so much. Zamar Yalai Abbasin joining us there live from Kabul. Now, the blasts at Kabul airport left 13 US military personnel dead and more than a dozen Americans injured. In response, US President Joe Biden has vowed to hunt down those responsible. Sean Calebs has more from Washington, D.C.
There have been warnings. In fact, the U.S. President Joe Biden came out several days ago and first announced that there were credible rumors that ISIS-K was planning some kind of attack, or at least insurgents were, but a lot of people were indeed pointed to that. The U.S. says it is going to continue its evacuation. It is not going to be deterred by this. Went on to say there are about 1,000 U.S. citizens still left in Afghanistan, and many Afghans with strong ties to the United States who are certainly in peril if they stay in Afghanistan. The effort is going to be to get all of those people out, still clinging to this August 31st deadline. In terms of what happened, U.S. President Biden saying that it was simply a sad day, going on to say that the United States will not forgive these killers and they will be hunted down. Also, at the same time, Biden says that he bears responsibility for the deaths of the U.S. servicemen in Afghanistan, saying he was the one that has made this decision, the way that the evacuation is being carried out, to put more additional troops into the area, and the buck stops with him.
French President Emmanuel Macron says the United States' decision not to extend its August 31st deadline for withdrawing from Afghanistan has led to a situation which is no longer under control. Macron made the remarks during his working visit to Ireland on Thursday. After the deadly blasts around Kabul airport, the French president said it was not safe for other countries to continue evacuations due to the U.S. decision. Macron said France has airlifted about 2,600 people, including some 2,000 Afghan citizens at risk. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Jean Castex said France will end its evacuations on Friday evening. Well, let's get to some more insight now on the political transition in Afghanistan. We're now joined by Professor Amalendu Misra of the Department of Politics, Philosophy and Religion at Lancaster University in the UK. Thank you so much for your time, Professor. These terrorist attacks that we've just seen at Kabul airport have certainly put the spotlight on the Taliban's capacity to provide security. In essence, does the Taliban have the resources to secure Afghanistan?
Thank you for your invitation. The short answer to that is no. Taliban is a house divided because it has got various factions within, although they have come together with a common purpose of getting rid of the external troops. But as soon as they take over the mantle of governance, they are going to fall out with each other. And in this particular instance of the tragic events that have taken place since yesterday, one could suggest that there is also an intramural fight that is going on between various factions of Islamic radicals. One faction is the Islamic State ideology, and the other faction is the Taliban ideology. And both trying to suggest that whatever worldview they have is better than the other. And what we see, or what we saw yesterday's events, suggests that it is a fight between their specific ideological worldview as well as the strategies that they have for the entire region of Central Asia, of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and to some extent Iran as a part of Islamic State of Khorasan.
Well, the Taliban as a house divided, as you say, does not bode well for security. Thank you so much, Professor Amalendu Misra, joining us there from the UK. Now, the chaos that followed the United States' withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan has elicited mixed reactions in Africa, where military interventions are still at play. In the Sahel, France has promised to wind down its long-running counterterrorism operation. Meanwhile, the mandate of African Union troops in Somalia expires in December this year. CGTN's Enoch Sokolia reports.
When France sent its forces into Mali after militants took control of the West African country's northern cities, their mission was to be a matter of weeks. That was 8 years ago. Since then, terrorist activity has spread across the Sahel region, enlarging France's counterterrorism efforts with it. Over 10,000 West Africans have died and over 1 million displaced since the security crisis started in 2012. French and African forces have suffered significant casualties. An end to the fighting is still not in sight. As the United States continues to evacuate its citizens and allies from Afghanistan this week, militants in Niger ambushed military officers in the southwest, killing 15 soldiers and injuring 7. Civilians remain the #1 target of the militants, and France now finds itself stuck in the Sahel, much like the United States found itself in Afghanistan. Military interventions in the Sahel and the UN-authorized African Union peacekeeping mission in Somalia have similarities to the US intervention in Afghanistan, despite having different dynamics. It's about years or decades-long foreign involvement in countries with weak or unstable governments. These operations have struggled with troop fatigue and dwindling support at home, while the groups they are fighting are patiently confident they will last longer than their enemy. Unlike the US, France is not withdrawing from the Sahel entirely. The European country, however, plans to close some military bases and decrease its 5,100 troops deployed in the Barkhane operation. Meanwhile, the extended mandate of the UN mission in Somalia ends on December 31st. That is despite political tension flaring up over twice delayed elections now slated for October. But images of mayhem at Kabul's airport and elsewhere may prompt military and peacekeeping interventions to think about the circumstances in which they are going to live when that time comes. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, let's take a short break now. Here's what's still ahead on the program. The UN warns of the worsening humanitarian crisis in Ethiopia's Tigray region. And kidnappers release more children in Nigeria. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Friday warned of a humanitarian crisis unfolding in northern Ethiopia's Tigray region. He described the situation there as a catastrophe.
The human price of this war is mounting by the day. A humanitarian catastrophe is unfolding before our eyes. More than 2 million people have been displaced from their homes, and a million more are in immediate need of life-saving humanitarian assistance, including food, water, shelter, and health care. At least 400,000 people are living in famine-like conditions.
Well, addressing the UN Security Council, Guterres called for an immediate ceasefire and a national political dialogue. But the prospect of talks between Ethiopia's government and the Tigray leadership is in doubt. The Tigray People's Liberation Front have expressed commitment to negotiating an end to the war. However, the United States told the Security Council that the Ethiopian government did not respond positively to calls for talks. The 9-month war in Tigray has claimed thousands of lives and left nearly 500,000 people starving. Well, the Ethiopian government now says it has reduced checkpoints for humanitarian convoys heading to Tigray. A statement from the Prime Minister's office said the move is aimed at easing the flow of aid to thousands of affected residents. The statement also said that 457 trucks loaded with humanitarian assistance have been deployed to the region, with 380 others having arrived. However, the state says TPLF fighters have been disrupting the exercise, leading to more displacements.
Due to the terrorist groups TPLF's incursions into the two other regions, as we've been witnessing over the past few weeks, the number of displaced in the Amhara and Afar regions have surpassed 500,000. In our last briefing session, the estimation was around 300,000. Now we see that it has surpassed 500,000. And this requires urgent humanitarian assistance to these communities that have been displaced as a result.
Ethiopian authorities, meanwhile, said the country's troops are ready to leave the disputed Abyei region between Sudan and South Sudan. Sudanese state media this week reported the United Nations has agreed to a request by Khartoum to withdraw Ethiopian peacekeepers deployed in Abyei. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more.
Ethiopia wants the withdrawal of its peacekeeping troops now in the disputed Abyei region to be done in a dignified and smooth manner. Addis Ababa first asked all sides to be on board for it to consider any exit from its UN-mandated mission between Sudan and South Sudan. Authorities here now say they expect all formalities to be fulfilled and all international laws respected for the peacekeeping force to leave the area. One top official at the Ethiopian National Defense Force said, and I quote, "Our contingent delivered all that was needed from it. That makes us proud. But now if our service is no longer needed by all sides, we are ready to return home, end of quote. Out of the mission's 4,190 personnel in Abyei, 3,158 soldiers and 7 policemen are Ethiopian. And now the United Nations has reportedly agreed to a request from Khartoum to withdraw the Ethiopian contingent of a peacekeeping force from a border region between Sudan and South Sudan. Ethiopian forces make up the vast majority of the peacekeeping mission in Abyei, also known as UNISFA, which was deployed under UN Security Council resolution in 2011 following the independence of South Sudan from Sudan, with a mandate to protect civilians. Sudan's request for the withdrawal of Ethiopian troops follows a recent border brawl between Khartoum and Addis Ababa. Grumtara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Let's now head to Nigeria, where gunmen have released students who were abducted 3 months ago in Niger State. The number of freed students has not yet been released. The government has yet to issue an official statement on these latest developments. North Central and Northwestern Nigeria have been grappling with kidnappings recently, with learning institutions being the prime targets. Well, let's get the very latest on this now. I'm joined by Phil Ihaza, live with us in Abuja. Phil, tell us more about these latest developments in Niger State, as well as how the release of these students was secured.
Oh, thank you. Indeed, it's a huge sigh of relief in Niger State at the moment, because quite a number of parents, relatives, guardians of over 100 students who were kidnapped 3 months ago, May 30th to be precise, have been released. That's according to a staff of the school, a head teacher. And so far what we know is that there's been a lot of celebrations among many families. Many of them had to even wait on the road to witness the arrival of the students who came from an 8-kilometer journey from a local government where they were set to be released. But we know that they are at a general hospital facility in the state capital, Mina, receiving proper health treatment, assessment of their psychological state and all of that. It's a normal procedure, because after that they are expected to be taken to the government house, where the government authorities or the authorities at the government house will reunite the children, students, to their relatives. We also know that there are children ranging from the age of 5 to 15. It's not clear exactly how many of them are released, because the head count is expected to be done at the government house by the government. And I'm sure that further details as to how they were released, whether they were released by ransom in spite of rumors and all of that, all those informations will be given officially by the government later on.
Well, thank you so much. That was Phil Ihaza live with us there in Abuja, Nigeria. Tanzanian police are trying to establish the identity of a gunman who shot 4 people dead and injured 6 others before being gunned down by police. The incident took place near the French embassy in the Tanzanian commercial capital, Dar es Salaam. Police say they have leads, but investigators are still hard at work. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
If he has issues, why kill all the police?
It started as a normal day for tourism officer Maria Maffei. Her office is just 70 meters from where an armed man opened fire with a pistol and an AK-47 assault rifle. Police on duty at the French embassy mission and a nearby bank tried to stop the gunman, who, according to witnesses, was yelling that he wanted to kill police officers.
We were all agitated, we were very frustrated at that moment. I was sweating at some point, you know, and some of us were saying our prayers because we were quite close to where the gunshots were. So if there was a miscalculation, one of us would have been hit in the office. So we thank God it just ended the way it ended, and we pray that this doesn't happen again.
After a heavy exchange of gunfire with police, the gunman was shot down by security forces. It's still not very clear whether the shootout in this heavily guarded diplomatic area was a terror attack. As it stands, the police say they're still working hard to identify the gunman. Reports from the police suggest the attack left 4 people, including 3 police officers and 1 security company guard, dead, while injuring 6 others.
We want to find out if he is a citizen or a foreigner. If he is a citizen, what is his name and where does he live? And after finding that out, what was his intention? Then, does he have others who work with him? All that will be revealed through the investigation.
President Samia Suluhu Hassan sent her condolences on Twitter to the police force and the families of the 4 people who lost their lives. She says the situation is now under control. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
The Chinese mission to the African Union has donated domestically produced COVID-19 vaccines to the continental body. The charge d'affaires of the Chinese mission, Chen Shufeng, said the 15,000 doses will cover AU officials and diplomats. 47 African countries have benefited from China's assistance in accessing vaccines since the pandemic began. This accounts for over 60% of total vaccines in Africa. Bankole Adeoye, who is the Political Affairs and Peace and Security Commissioner of the African Union Commission, has thanked the Asian nations' efforts in helping combat the coronavirus pandemic in Africa.
Since the outbreak of the pandemic, China and Africa have consolidated the friendship and mutual trust through overcoming the difficulties together. So China will continue to strengthen vaccine cooperation with the African Union and African countries to provide Africa with safe, effective, high quality, and affordable vaccines.
For the African Union, we remain committed to be working with the internationally recognized body, which is the WHO, World Health Organization, to carry out a science-based tracing of the origin. I think this is what is necessary for us, and our member states will be committed to working with the international community to get to the scientific origins of this. But what is important now is how we work together as a globe, as an international community, and defeat this pandemic.
To Nigeria now, amid the ongoing strike action by the National Association of Resident Doctors, Saudi Arabia is hoping to attract doctors among Nigeria's medical personnel. A recruitment exercise was recently organized in Abuja on behalf of the Saudi Health Ministry. Hundreds of Nigerian doctors turned up, fueling fears of more doctors leaving the country. CGTN's Deji Badmos has more.
About 2,000 medical workers leave Nigeria annually to work abroad. The men and women in this room are hoping to join that number. They're waiting to take their turn for a job interview to work as medical personnel in Saudi Arabia. Not wanting their identity revealed, some of the doctors open up on why they want to leave.
I am happy to be in Nigeria, but the fact of the situation available does not make me feel happy. It makes me highly frustrated. Nobody is asking for any extra. Just give us the basic. If things were good, this is my country. This is where I have citizenship. My families are here. They depend on me to take care of them. Why would I leave the comfort of my home to go to another man's land?
Even if I'm picked and I go for this, it's not because of the money. But I'm concerned about the security issues. You understand? I want to stay in a place where there's going to be rest of mind. So if I have the opportunity of living, I'm going to live with my whole family.
Over 500 doctors are taking part in the recruitment screening, happening at a time when doctors and government health institutions in the country are on strike, demanding improved welfare. Saudi Arabia is not the first country to attempt to poach doctors from Nigeria. The United Kingdom and the United States have regularly sought doctors from Nigeria as well. And with an estimated 42,000 doctors for Nigeria's over 200 million population, the departure of these doctors will add more strain to the country's already stressed health sector.
Even young doctors that are coming on board from medical school didn't want to stay in the country. So are we just training doctors so that other countries come and harvest them? Government needs to be sincere. If you want us to work, if you want doctors to stay, give us an enable environment, pay salary at the right time and at the appropriate time.
In 2020, the Nigeria Medical Association reported that out of 75,000 doctors officially registered in the country, over 33,000 had migrated to other countries. The government is still locked in negotiation with striking doctors in public hospitals to get them to call off the strike, which is the second this year alone. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And coming up in your business news, up next. Nigeria's state oil firm posts a profit of $698 million, a first in its 44-year history. And Uganda reviews tax laws to help cushion businesses from COVID-19 regulations.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation has made a profit for the first time in its 44-year history. It generated an income of $698 million after tax last year. It is a surprising turnaround, especially since the economic shocks caused by the COVID-19 pandemic triggered a slump in the oil price. But the state oil firm says during the coronavirus mayhem, it saw an opportunity to cut costs, improve efficiency, as well as lower borrowing rates. The NNPC board is yet to decide whether to declare a dividend or increase capital reserves with the profit. While still in Nigeria, businesses in Abuja are concerned about an emission tax imposed on them by government. Authorities slammed the $200 levy on firms that use generators or heavy-duty machinery. This despite the nation's inability to meet its electricity demand. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
Abdul Rahim Nuhu runs this printing business in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. For a business like his that's solely dependent on power supply, Nuhu spends at least $60 on electricity bills and another $50 on fueling his generator. New emission tax imposed by authorities is putting a strain on businesses like his, whose running costs are already choking.
It will affect the business because right away now, we are even running on a low sales, so we don't have much sales now. So and we don't have much sales doesn't guarantee us that we should not pay for shop rent. We should not pay for the other taxes that we are still paying for, because nobody will give that excuse. So we need to pay what we are still paying. So if they want to add another tax now, I think it will affect our business much. And generator issue we are talking about, are we even happy that we are using generator? If we are having electricity all the time, they supply us, at least we don't need generator anymore.
Authorities say the emission of harmful substances from heavy-duty machines and generators is intolerable and the need to curb it inevitable. So businesses could pay as much as $200 or even more on emission taxes.
You know, international conventions allow for people to choose among options. Unfortunately, Nigeria don't have the option other than to use generator because power supply has remained permanently epileptic and is struggling to revive itself from the quagmire condition.
Nigeria's small and medium enterprise sector is the backbone of the economy. According to audit firm PricewaterhouseCoopers, the sector contributes 48% to the national GDP and it accounts for 84% of employment. Additional taxes would further impede the growth of businesses.
The gains we are seeing in inflation for 14.75 will perhaps increase to an amount that you don't want to know about. It could go back to 18, it could go back to 19%. Cost of goods and services will significantly increase. If producers are unable to manage it and transfer to final consumer, it's going to be evident in layoffs, which will increase unemployment figures. Not charge people extra tax for trying to produce, for trying to mop up unemployment rate, for trying to stabilize the economy.
Nigeria is rated 131 out of 190 countries in the 2019 Ease of Doing Business Index. Economic watchers recommend the government ramp up efforts to boost electricity supply and provide an enabling environment that encourage small businesses like Nuhu's to thrive. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Uganda is reviewing new tax measures that came into force in July. It's part of the government's response to the post-lockdown aftershocks that have ruined businesses and forced others to cut jobs just to stay afloat. The government says the planned review of the 2021-2022 tax regime follows an outcry from the business community. CGTN's Michael Baleka explains.
Kampala's streets are bustling with activity. The government recently lifted the 42-day lockdown measures to control the spread of the COVID-19 virus. And while some businesses are slowly getting back on their feet, many traders here in the capital say they are struggling to pick up the pace.
This is now a trying moment for traders, all the traders, because we're facing quite a lot. First of all, the rent issue, the taxes, the KCC, everything is a mess because we have not been working for quite long, like 2 months. And now you have come to open up a shop, and what they tell you, like, you know what, you need to pay the 2 months real rent.
Shams says the debts are up his neck, yet he's not making enough from his sewing machine trade. But the Uganda Revenue Authority says it is moving to review some taxes to help businesses recover.
There has been a conversation ongoing, which is healthy for any business, especially during this time. I think it's healthy for stakeholders to come together and discuss policy, to discuss tax measures, and see how best we can support each other.
Some of the taxes being negotiated include duties on imported textile, garments, and rental income tax, among others. The traders also want taxes on petrol and diesel reduced.
Businesses are very critical. If government is to get taxes tomorrow, businesses must first of all be there. They must be operation. If businesses close, then there's no way how are we going to address the revenue shortfall. So government is starting to see the light.
The government has also created a COVID-19 relief fund worth $56.5 million to help cushion small businesses affected by the lockdown. Some economic analysts argue that in order to revive the economy, the government should start using taxation as a tool of development beyond revenue collection. They believe some taxes should be suspended to enable businesses to flourish. Traders say the 12% levy on internet data has made internet consumption very expensive for businesses.
That's really unnecessary and counterproductive because so many people are using these platforms to trade, you know. So such taxes can be waived for the time being.
But for traders like Shams Din Shero and many others, the future remains uncertain, largely due to the unpredictable path of the COVID-19 pandemic that has so far killed close to 3,000 people. Michael Baleka, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
South African insurers are strengthening their defenses against potential new waves of coronavirus infections as worse than expected mortality claims emerge from the ongoing pandemic. Angelo Coppola has more.
Of the main insurers in South Africa, only Absa Life has released its financial results. The other players will release their results in the next 10 days. The results are likely to be mirrored by their competitors.
Last year, our excess claims, so higher than usual claims, was about 200 million. But just in the first 6 months of this year, we've seen that increase to 500 million excess claims. What's interesting is we can only attribute about a quarter of that directly to COVID-19, but it's similar to a trend we see in South Africa where the COVID-19 death rate's about 3%, but the excess deaths are much higher.
As more vaccines have become available, the problem emerging now is vaccine hesitancy and its impact.
The one thing that we are monitoring is obviously the rollout of the vaccine program and the success of that. And in particular, as we've now sort of started to de-risk the availability of vaccines, as it seems to be a bit more stable, It's now about hesitancy and dealing with hesitancy and the right sort of information. So yes, the combined impact of that meant that we've needed to strengthen our reserves by another 800 million for further impact of waves of infection.
Absa Life was paying 3,000 claims a month prior to COVID-19. That jumped to 7,000 claims during the virus infection spikes.
Placed lots of strain on our actuarial areas in terms of modelling and what we need to model, but operationally too. I mean, what we've seen though that's positive is that it has pushed a bit of an acceleration in digitization and self-service, so deal with those volumes.
Academics and modelers expect a fourth wave to strike South Africa in December. Many insurers are planning for that now.
So another thing we've done is we want our customers to enjoy their cover. Don't want it to lapse right now when they need it most. So we've also offered premium relief, so customers can miss an additional 2 premiums during the next 6 months without their cover lapsing.
Insurance is a grudge purchase at the best of times, but in these corona times, perhaps it's not a bad investment. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Bilateral trade between Afghanistan and India has come to a virtual halt after the Taliban took power in Afghanistan. While most of Afghanistan remains closed to the outside world, the absence of Afghan goods is bound to have an impact in the Indian market. Bilateral trade between the two nations is estimated at about $1.5 billion. The Taliban has stopped the movement of cargo via Pakistan to India, and all imports have stopped. Both the traders and consumers are bearing the brunt of it all.
Mujahid Safi, one of the largest exporter of dry fruit from Afghanistan, is a worried man these days. He will lose millions of dollars this season as the trade route to India is closed. It is the peak trading season. The products are all packed and ready to be exported, but the turmoil in Afghanistan is already affecting exporters like Safi. India imported 85% of dry fruits from Afghanistan in the last year. The Indian market is already seeing a twofold jump in the prices.
During the festival of Diwali, the customers will not get good quality dry fruits as most of the stock we have is over. Leftover stock is not a good quality. They will have to pay 50 times more for what is available. We are not expecting new stocks as the banking facility is also not available.
The Indian exporters are also impacted. In last fiscal year, India's export to Afghanistan was worth $825 million. But in the present scenario, there are a number of concerns among the exporters.
Our only concern has been how the trade will move forward, and we are advising exporters also to look forward in certain way. You all know that at this point of time, the currency of Afghanistan has depreciated sharply. In fact, in last 1 week, Afghani currency has moved from $80 to $1 to 86 to $1, a sharp depreciation of around 7%.
With the festive season around the corner, the business community wants the government to intervene, or else the bilateral trade will end and the customer will have to pay more. Ravinder Baba, CGTN, Delhi.
Meanwhile, despite uncertainties, bilateral trade between Pakistan and Afghanistan has been continuing. The Afghanistan-Pakistan Transit Trade Agreement, first signed in 2010, was extended this year in July for 6 months by Afghanistan's former president, Ashraf Ghani. And though Ghani has now fled the country, the Taliban has allowed transit trade to flow across the border crossings. Our correspondent Daniel Khan has this report from Torkham, the hub of Pakistan-Afghanistan trade.
Pakistan is Afghanistan's largest trading partner. 48% of Afghanistan's total exports went to and 14% of imports came from Pakistan.
Movement on both sides of Torkham has increased massively as cargo trucks continue to cross the border, contrary to fears of a reduction in Pak-Afghan trade due to the changing situation in Afghanistan.
As a result, trade activities at border crossings have picked up momentum. Some even go as far as calling the Taliban takeover a blessing in disguise. I have seen a significant rise in the transit trade as well as import and export. In the times of the previous government, there were only 30 to 35 trucks going in and out of the country. But ever since the Taliban came, the number of trucks carrying goods has gone up to 300 to 400 daily. It is a very big number, and traders are very satisfied. Experts say the control of the Taliban has reduced security risks for Pakistan, and once the present transition period is over and stability returns to Afghanistan, Pakistan will be able to significantly increase exports. What I have seen during the last few weeks is that trade between Pakistan and Afghanistan has become very easy and convenient since the Taliban took control of the border facility. Previously, the traders and even the drivers had to go through a lot of hardships on the other side. But with the grace of God, now everything is smooth. The establishment of a pro-Pakistan government in Kabul can make Pakistan, especially Balochistan, safer, which will help complete China-Pakistan economic corridor projects, further attracting investment in oil and gas exploration along the Pak-Afghan border. Many believe that greater involvement of China, Russia and Pakistan in Afghanistan can play a positive role for the country's stability and development. Daniel Khan, CGTN, Torkham, Pak-Afghan border.
Time for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. What's in a name? A South African town seeks a new identity.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The best of Mother Nature near the heart of Mother Africa. The scenery and allures of Victoria Falls, where the sun rays kiss the sprinkles of magnificent waters cascading upon the rocks. The wonders of Kenya's Masai Mara, where the world comes to feast upon the beauty of the beasts. The Lake Nakuru in Kenya, where flamingos come in the millions to rest their wings. Catch it here on our special series on Africa's famous national parks.
Look, it's a small herd of elephants.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The South African agricultural town of Brandfort, south of Johannesburg, has just become the latest urban centre to change its name. The town will now be known as Winnie Mandela, as a tribute to one of the country's anti-apartheid fighters and former wife of Nelson Mandela. Winnie Mandela lived in Brandfort for 8 years in the late 1970s after being exiled there by the apartheid government. Angela Coppola has the story.
City, town, suburb and street name changes have been happening in the country since 1994, when a democratically elected government first came to power. Academics say it plays a key role in creating a new national culture.
To honour the people who not only for resistance, but also who've excelled in other parts of life, and to bring those names to the fore so that we can remember them, and so that we can forge also a new national sense of ourselves.
The progress in changing names is uneven, with some provinces moving a lot faster than others.
Like Limpopo, for example, was quite ahead of the rest with the renaming of the major towns. eThekwini as a metro was also quite a bit ahead. We've seen that, if you look at a DA governed council like the Cape Town City Council, they've had to be more innovative in terms of the names and so on that they bring in, the histories that they bring in. I think they've done pretty well in that regard.
While the name changes are important, many municipalities are struggling to stay within their budgets.
A criticism is, of course, the costs that are associated, but if one does it in an incremental fashion, but one doesn't have to change all names immediately, one can do it incrementally, as boards get old, etc., then one should be able to manage the budget implications.
Analysts say the country remains fractured despite the name change process, as not everyone accepts the importance of changing the names of places.
And the big reason for that, of course, is the socioeconomic disparity that continues in the country, and that drives social polarization. So So the issue, I think, for a lot of white South Africans, they don't want to let go of names and so on that they're familiar with. They feel that they're losing a sense of their own identity in relation to the country. And I think it's actually just a reflection of how divided South Africans still are.
Name changes are an emotive issue, and it's essential that there's communication between all the stakeholders so that there's no confusion about what's being done and why. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Your sports news up next. Coming up, renewed rivalry as top teams are paired in the UEFA Champions League draw.
How would you create